Howdy, I'm Jammer. So, just a reminder as always, please remember that I have a Patreon for this channel as well as for my own art. There will be a link in the description section below to my link tree. Patreon link is in there along with links to my website, my Instagram, and all that fun stuff where you can see all the cool stuff that I'm making. It's $1 a month or even just $1 one time. Anything and everything would help, and I'll call your name out on the channel and I'll say you're cool. I mean, you're cool already. I mean, you don't need my validation, but just if you want somebody to say you're cool on the air, you know, consider it. Anyway, so today's video is going to be yet another single issue video. I'm really excited about these series because it's a chance to sort of, again, break it down to just one single issue, which is kind of fun. Sometimes I get so wrapped up in my bound trades that I forget that reading comics is also sometimes about reading individual issues. Well, recently I went into my hometown shop, Ground Zero Comics, and I was asking my friend Michael about, hey, is there a series related to the character the Spectre? Now, originally I wanted the Spectre, my dog's crying a little bit. Originally, I wanted the Spectre, the DC Archives version, like the Golden Age or Silver Age Spectre. It was an interesting character, and I thought I would give it a whirl. They didn't have it. But he did recommend that if I was interested in the Spectre, we had, in the graphic novel book club that I'm a part of, read one of a really interesting Spectre book already, particularly this version of Spectre right here. Now, this is the version of the Spectre that ran during the 1990s. It was written by, I had to write their names so I could, remember it, John Ostrander and Tom Mandrake. This run of Spectre is still widely regarded as probably one of the best and probably one of the most interesting for the way it explored Christian mythology. Immediately, I have to clarify something because I recognize I'm an atheist who just said the word Christian mythology. People are going to be mad. What this means is it's an attempt to sort of explore the stories and the rhetoric around the notions of God and angels, heaven and hell, goodness, rightness, justice, and vengeance, and how all of that wraps up in the longer story and mythos of Christianity. I'm not suggesting that Christianity is a myth, but, at the same time, I'm an atheist, so I don't care. But what's important here is that this story, this run of the Spectre, really explored a lot of those issues. Now, this is an ongoing story that had somewhere around, I believe, 50 issues. I'm starting at number 0 here for this particular video. But also, fun fact, issue number 0 in this series came literally after issue number 21. So, right off the bat, this is another reason why doing individual issues is fun, because sometimes you can't find number 1. Sometimes you can't even find number 2 or 3. Sometimes you have to start with number 4 or issue 0. Now, we also have a nice, helpful, or a little bit of help here, because issue 0s in terms of superhero comics are usually considered prequels. They're little stories that are intended really to be just kind of standalone works that take place before the main storylines. Now, the Spectre issue number 0 is really interesting because the character of the Spectre is going about doing his, Spectre-y things when he's summoned to a maternity ward where a young baby seems to be calling out to him. He eventually arrives in the maternity ward. The baby invites him to come into his soul, and the Spectre agrees, and once inside, he discovers that the baby is in fact being possessed by the spirit entity known as Lady Beltane. This woman is an ongoing foe of the Spectre, but both of them are ultimately kind of after the same goal, which is trying to find some sense of justice when they themselves feel that they have been irreparably damaged, and oftentimes want to enact some form of vengeance. The difference here is that the Spectre is ultimately a tool or a servant of God. And again, it's important to recognize God in this sense is not some DC character. It's supposed to be the God of the Judeo-Christian faith, aka the God that exists with Muslims, Jews, and Christians. We really need to find some way of saying Judeo-Christian Muslim, or I need to. Anyway, the point is that this is God himself. Now, the Spectre is kind of, through most of this book, constantly interrupting Lady Beltane, reminding everybody that, once again, men really need to stop interrupting women when they're talking. But at the same time, she narrates the story of the Spectre himself, how he came to be, originally being the literal manifestation of God's vengeance. But then Jesus was born, and Jesus and God's vengeance could not exist on the earthly plane at the same time. After Christ was crucified, God's vengeance kind of resumed its shape, and the archangel Gabriel began, effectively created some manner of arrangement where the Spectre would embody the souls of human beings in order to enact this vengeance. And then after this point, the comic is basically just Lady Beltane telling a series of stories of how the Spectre has manifested over the centuries. It tells the story of one man who lives in the region of India. His wife and daughter are murdered. He wants vengeance, and so he becomes the very first Spectre, becoming, in essence, Shiva, the god of destruction and death. By the way, if anybody is a student of Hinduism, please forgive me. Hinduism was not taught that much in my high school, and I haven't studied a lot of Eastern religions, so if you want a more nuanced version of that, leave a comment in the description, or leave a comment below to clarify it, or else maybe even just send me the link to Shiva, which I probably should have looked up beforehand. Whatever the case, the Spectre became Shiva and enacted vengeance at the expense of this man's soul. Lady Beltane was foiled. Now, Lady Beltane's goal is usually to capture the souls of the wicked, but sometimes also at the same time capture the souls of the good and the decent and the pure, with the intention that this will create some kind of order. It's one of these old structures of, we both want the same thing. My ends are just a little more shady than your ends, but at the same time, it's the Spectre, so his means are not exactly very noble either. We then follow up to another story where a young woman, I believe in the realm of Europe, I can't remember the specific location, but she's captured by a group of ruffians and then taken to this old man who's been harvesting souls. This seems rather familiar. But we eventually discover this poor innocent woman who's just walking about is in fact actually the Spectre who's chased Lady Beltane down and is foiling her plan. And from that point on, we see instances in which Lady Beltane and Spectre have been chasing each other throughout all of eternity and history. Lady Beltane offers the Spectre a chance to, join her, join her and end this ongoing struggle, to which case the Spectre goes, hell no, I'm the Spectre and I have a brand to protect, duh. So he captures her soul and throws her to the people whose lives she has destroyed over the centuries. And then it ends with a very, very, very sad moment where the doctor notices that, the baby died. So this is kind of an interesting issue, Again, this is a prequel, kind of, but it's really more than that. It's a little exploration of morality and what it is, at least in regards to a kind of typical divine or sort of Christian path. Having been raised in the Christian church, I'm at least knowledgeable and intelligent enough to understand that the notion of morality and goodness is very crucial. The ideal that you aspire to as a Christian is to be a good person, ultimately to achieve eternal reward. Allow my catty atheist to come in and be like, it'd be nice if you were good for its own sake, but whatever. The point is that in Christian mythology, in Christian rhetoric, in just the Christian faith overall, the notion is that we are supposed to try to be good people to attain divine grace. The Spectre is an interesting exploration of it, and so this issue number 0 is a chance to sort of explore the fact that we have a superhero whose main deal is literally being God's vengeance, and seeing him over the centuries enact vengeance as a way of kind of overcoming his own personal flaws. Because again, the figure in question here, I believe, is Jim Currigan. Somebody double check me on that. If I got it wrong, leave a comment in the description section below. I want to make sure I'm giving the right info here. But the story of the Spectre is a man who felt a profound sense of wrong, and rather than trying to understand the complexities of human motivation, he wanted vengeance, and so reached out and became this kind of otherworldly being. Now again, one of the things that this channel, or the thing that this channel is really preoccupied with, is the form of comics. What is interesting about this individual issue formally? Well, you probably saw already just by looking at some of these pages, but God, Tom Mandrake is amazing, and his stories and page layouts are amazing. You can see the way the dialogue balloons are set up, but you can also see the way that these figures are moving about through the space of these pages. We get the image of God's hand effectively coming out and God's vengeance manifesting throughout history. And then we get another page turner here. And I wanted to point out this page especially. Please ignore the Star Trek advertisement on the other page. Yet another fun reason why you should buy individual comics. You get to see all these old ads that make you go, oh yeah, that was a thing. Kind of. Yeah, well, by the way, the fun ad on the back of this comic has Mona Lisa being a Trekkie, which I'm not a Trekkie myself, but I just, that's just gold, man. Anyway, looking at this page, what's really interesting to me formally is the way that they divide up the panels of the comic here. You'll see that the Spectre is ultimately placed here in the middle of all of this, and then these energy beams shooting out from the main body or the head divide up each of these little individual scenes. These are panels that are created by the essence of the Spectre. Again, if you read enough comics, typically you've seen enough comics that rely on just rectangular boxes or square boxes or panels, maybe a full page spread in order to convey the information. But this is an interesting tool. It's a nice little visual structure, again, to divide these little individual moments in the actual comic itself, but then also further adds to the aesthetic. One of the things that's also really great about this book is, again, it's a comic book. It's a superhero comic book, and it's a superhero comic book that was being published in the 90s. Anybody who reads comics and read comics in the 90s knows that there is this indescribable visual tone that was the 90s. It was a lot of machismo and dudes being super gung-ho, and there were guns and knives and people gritting their teeth all the time and making the most absurd and grotesque and weird faces. It was an odd time. It was the 90s. So, what's really great to me is the way that Tom Mandrake and Ostrander managed to capture some of that energy of the 1990s in terms of some of their visual cues. If you look at this moment here, when, again, this man has effectively become the embodiment of Shiva and the Spectre, you see a lot of these sort of bold, dramatic lines. It's like his body is sort of emerging forward, or being pushed forward by these lines. And we have the image of the skull coming out, too, conveying that this figure has become death personified. But then just as well, too, it's a little gesture, but if you look at these three top panels in relation to this bottom one, too, you see that this man's life, it's almost effectively like he is ripped away. By becoming the Spectre, his humanity is forever left, and he becomes this otherworldly thing. But at the same time, his humanity is still overlapping his development into the Spectre. At this moment, you have a really nice visual rhetoric to show this man's transformation into this otherworldly thing that's really going to forever divide him from his wife and daughter, which is the main reason why he became that in the first place. And if you progress just a couple pages later, when he finally confronts Lady Beltane, if you look at these very bottom panels here, these diagonal panels are really visually interesting for the way that he is able to foil Lady Beltane, and it manages to sort of convey his struggle, his fear. It's, again, it's a little thing, but it's still really visually interesting, and it provides another dynamic for it. Now, along with that, when we move a little further and we move into the kind of dark European tale that is the second story of Lady Beltane's, you'll note this sudden shift in tone. The pages have gotten darker, the figures have gotten a little more meaty, but then also, too, looking at the layout of these panels, there's a lot of play in terms of the horizontal and the vertical. We have these horizontal panels at the top, but then during the initial confrontation, we again get into these sort of tall, we get these tall vertical panels that are kind of sharp and distinct and create this gorgeous visual tension. This book is energy, and you can just kind of feel the anger just permeating off of the page. Mandrake is just really successful, at least in my estimation, in conveying this beautiful energy. And this page here, when we see Beltane trying to escape the clutches of the Spectre, who's ultimately going to destroy her, we get a nice little sort of, it's not a diagonal, but in fact it almost looks like sections of a clock face divvied up. And on this exterior form here, or this exterior panel, you'll note it's just solid black. That may not seem terribly important, but again, we have this kind of dense blackness dividing up these panels, and it's a kind of chilling statement on the fact that the Spectre is beyond mercy. And it may seem a little kitsch to observe it, but mercy is an important element to our humanity. Mercy is empathy. We're willing to recognize the pain and the humanity of another human being, letting go of our own thoughts, our emotions, our feelings, what have you. It's a little thing, but by denying it to Lady Beltane, this woman, this figure, this entity that he has been chasing for centuries, it's a reminder again that the fundamental quality of the Spectre is he lacks empathy, which is one of the crucial definitions of what it means to be a human being. If you can empathize with other people, you can be a part of community, regardless of whatever other values another person may hold. It's by empathizing with people, by recognizing their needs and wants and feelings and desires, we can kind of understand our own needs and wants and feelings and desires in relation to them. Community happens, and the world becomes a much better place. The Spectre is a constant game of the pure ideal of what justice is, of what vengeance is, and Jim Corrigan the man. And so what's really great to me about this issue 0 is it's not just another opportunity to provide some empty origin story, because origin stories are boring. Let's be real. It's not important how somebody became something. It's the only thing that matters is who are they right now in this moment, because that's really the only thing that matters. And so this is more to me than just an empty 0 story. It's more than just an empty prequel. It's, again, an opportunity to reflect on this character that Ostrander and Mandrake had been working with at this point for years. This is a really great book, and so I would really encourage you, if you've never read any of Ostrander's Spectre, check it out. This book is amazing, and it's definitely worth your time. All right, I'll call it a day there. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please don't forget, like, share, and subscribe, all that jazz. It helps me know that you like this and you want to see more. It helps YouTube know that you like this and you want to see more. When it comes to the Spectre, issue number 0, Ostrander and Mandrake's run on the Spectre was eventually collected into a bound trade, like my little Red Lanterns book over here. But when I checked with my friend Michael at Ground Zero, he mentioned that it is currently out of print. So tracking down an issue of this is going to be a little hard. Now check your local comic book shop, because they will probably have a bound trade, either just somewhere on their shelves or maybe just in their back rooms. And also don't forget, and even though the book is out of print, you can always try your local public library, because if they don't have a copy of it, they may be able to get you a copy of it through interlibrary loan. In terms of this individual issue, however, most comic shops, in fact, all comic book shops, have old issue bins. There'll be long white boxes, usually with little tabs that'll show you which comic is what. Go to the S's, find Spectre. It doesn't matter if they don't have a number 1. Just grab a copy of this book and hop right into it. Maybe see if they've got issue 0. Food for thought. And, of course, as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Go read some comics.